Welcome to Introduction to Sociology 2, and today we shall be learning Talcott Parsons' idea of functionalism. While we'll begin and move deeper into our understanding of Talcott Parsons, let us explore the learning objectives. Let us go through the objectives. What are we going to learn and read about? We definitely will be reading about Talcott Parsons, who he was very briefly, and then what is his idea of functionalism and how did he develop his social theory of action or the theory of action, and then what were his systems, what are the different types of systems and the subsystems that he was talking about. We learn about the pattern variables, the functional imperatives, and more importantly, we shall also be having a look at the AGIL model, that is adaptation, goal attainment, integration and latency. And last but not the least, what are we going to learn? We'll be learning about social equilibrium. Because at the end of the day, what did Talcott Parsons want to believe? And what was something that he was trying to establish? That we must know, without which our understanding of Talcott Parsons will be incomplete. So, let's begin. Before we move into his theories, we'll go into a very short description of his biography, who he was and how he could be placed on the socio-historical plane to understand the range of works he had done. Talcott Parsons was a son of a Congregational minister who served as a president of Marriott College in Ohio. He did his undergraduate at Amherst, where he majored in biology. He studied for a year at the London School of Economics under Malinowski. In an exchange relationship at Heidelberg, he encountered Max Weber's work and wrote his doctoral dissertation on capitalism. He played an important role in introducing Weber to America, where he translated Protestant ethics and the spirit of capitalism. So as we found that Talcott Parsons actually belonged to a very academic background, where his father was one of the president of a renowned college. Then he majored in biology, we must remember. He was not into straight-cut social science scholar. He belonged to the biology background and he also majored under Malinowski at the London School of Economics. Whenever we are talking about Malinowski, we should be talking about structural functionalism, which Malinowski was very famous for, how he propounded that, and how was Malinowski's idea of structural functionalism influencing Talcott Parsons. That also we want to know. Parsons went to Harvard as an instructor in 1927 and finally retired as an emeritus professor in 1973. He became the president of the American Sociological Association in 1942. And though functionalism is no longer that relevant today, he still remains a major figure. Therefore, a very important point to be noted is, as a marker of his pedigree and his excellence and his bona fide nature of the scholarship that he had, we must not forget that he actually went on to teach at Harvard University, from where he had retired as an emeritus professor. And at the same time, he was also the president of the very prestigious American Sociological Association. Now, coming to the introduction. His concept of system has been central from the very beginning. In his general theory of action, he shows how societies are structured and fit together. It includes the four systems such as the cultural system, the social system, the personality system, and the behavioral system. And these systems are basic in understanding his idea of functionalism. In his general theory of action, he was trying to show how different systems befit one another. And that is how society is being structured or given a shape. Now we'll move to the social system and the cultural system. The cultural system is a meaning or the symbolic system, for example, religious beliefs and the national values. Here a key concept is socialization, which is an agent of social control. Cultural system is where we develop our values and where we, go through some shared beliefs. And the most important agent of cultural system is the socialization, which again is an agent of social control. It is through the socialization that we become aware of the normative expectations of the society and what each others expect from one another. And therefore, socialization will begin or remain a very important idea of the cultural system, especially our religious beliefs, our national values, our consciousness, how symbolically we interact with one another, and how symbols become significant here with a given meaning, when we attach a given meaning to it, which helps us in our socialization, in identifying ourselves with something, is very important. So, for instance, the World Cup is going around, and some people and some nations, some countries, it is the game with which they are being identified with. And all over, there is always certain items or certain things with which we learn to associate ourselves with. So these values, these ideas and these conceptions go a long way. The social system is the most elaborated one, where role interaction is very important. Here again, the basic unit is role interaction. A social system consists of a plurality of individuals interacting with each other in a given situation, which has at least a physical or an environmental aspect. Actors are motivated to the optimization of gratification, and their relation to their situations are mediated in terms of culturally constructed or shared symbols. Here, plurality means two people or even collectivities. And social system is a placeholder where individuals interact with one another. Here, role interaction plays a very important role. How am I going to interact with another? And there is a given boundary within which I'm going to interact. There is a delimited space within which my actions will be judged and assessed. And this also has an environmental aspect or a physical entity. So here behavioral systems, also become important. And why individuals are motivated, and what are the goals that they pursue, and how their pursuance of goals will lead to the sustenance of the system as a whole. And often our relations to the situations, our relations with one another are mediated by the symbols, the cultural symbols that we had been talking about. And when Talcott Parsons talks of plurality, he speaks of both the individuals, which can be 2 or 3, or even a larger group or larger organizations. For instance, United States, where there are many member nations which must be taken into consideration. So plurality has its own unique meaning. Personality system and the behavioral system. The basic unit of the personality system is the individual actor. He focuses on individual needs and gratifications. The fourth system is the behavioral organism. Here, the basic unit is the physical aspect of the human person. And this includes the organic and the physical environment in which the individuals live. Parsons' view of socialization shows how all these systems are interrelated. So he was talking about personality. When you're talking about personality, the individual himself is at the center of the focus. And when we are talking about the behavioral system, we are also talking about the skills that individuals have. Certain skills which are more important than others. And certain bodily features or certain characteristics or certain skills which set him apart from the others. So these are the different yardsticks of the systems that we are talking about. So people at birth are not only behavioral organisms, but as they grow up, they move into the path of socialization. People internalize the social values of the cultural system by their own, by learning from others, and especially the other actors in the social system, that what is expected of them. They learn the role expectations and become full participants. Thus, values come from the cultural system itself. Normative or role expectations are learnt in the social system. The individual identity comes from the personality system. Lastly, the biological equipment comes from the biological organism. So, in the path that the individual, through his socialization, turns himself from the biological organism to a full member of the society, it is in the social system that he must learn the normative expectations. And it is through the cultural system that he must learn to identify themselves or himself with other individuals with similar kind of aspirations, or learn to attach meaning to given items. So it is within the system that conformity is taught and preached, but very subliminally. It is expected that you will have a complementary feeling to one another. You will know what the society expects from you, and the society should also know what you are expecting of the society. So, when this complementarity is there, society thrives well. And therefore, these normative expectations and the demands of each other must be very clearly sought out. The goals and why they cherish those goals, and what are exactly we expect from the others, that must be spelled out. How socialization works in concrete social system. Consider a juvenile gang. One of the values is to steal car. That value must be made their own, which actually refers to the cultural system. In social system terms, they must follow the given normative expectations. Also, their own identity must be involved in the membership. Membership in the gang must answer certain needs or drives in their own personality. The behavioral system is also involved, since the potential gang members must possess certain dexterity to live up to the expectations of the others. The systems are not mutually exclusive, but they show interdependence that functionalism constantly stresses. So, they give you an example of the juvenile gang, which is there to perform all sorts of juvenile delinquency. One amongst them may be, stealing cars. This is a kind of a social system, because you understand the normative expectations, what other members of the gang expect from you, and how you go about doing it. It is also a personality system, because it involves individual actor and how he or she conforms to the given norms and identifies himself with the system. It is also at the same time a biological system, because individuals are supposed to have certain environmental aspects, a biological capacities, and sometimes which may act as their dexterity or the skill. So there are certain skills that the individuals are entitled with when they go and join a gang, which is expected of them physiologically as well. So this is how Talcott Parsons show that the systems penetrate into one another. Systems become interdependent with one another, and all the systems that he was trying to say, the social system, the personality system, the biological system, and the cultural systems are not actually mutually exclusive. They are not isolated. They are not watertight compartments that the one cannot mingle into the other. But rather, there is a continuous osmosis where there is a continuous give and take, a diffusion between the systems that Talcott Parsons was suggesting to us. So we'll go to the theory of action. Purposive actors who were oriented to goals, but they had to fulfill certain conditions. They themselves were defined by normative expectations, but the question is the specifications of what different contingencies and expectations that the actors were likely to face. The situations were not entirely unstructured and uncertain. Therefore, he formulated pattern variables. These categorized expectations and the structures of relationships are important, and this made the theory of action more explicit. Therefore, Talcott Parsons talks of pattern variables, where you make choices, where you make decisions, and not everything is given to you on a platter. Not everything is structured or, previously determined or predetermined. Something suddenly happens before you, and you will have to take the decision. How will you take the decision? That depends upon pattern variables. Therefore, the choices that we make while deciding our course of action becomes very important. And this also lies at the core of the decision making, especially in the context of normative expectations, because we know that the society expects something from us. So while taking the action or taking any decision, we have to be very careful. So what does these choices depend upon? The ascription versus achievement, diffuseness versus specificity, effectivity versus neutrality, particularism versus universalism, collectivity versus self. Now, while talking about Talcott Parsons' pattern variables, we have to go back to Ferdinand Tönnies and how he had differentiated between the Gemeinschaft and the Gesellschaft. Gemeinschaft is usually the kind of actions we take in the primary relationships, especially in a rural background, and how the relationships are more explicit there. And our decisions to carry on with our choice is also far more liberal, and in the sense that we talk about it and it is more spontaneous. But when we move into the urban zone, our choices become more constricted and we become self-conscious. So that kind of spontaneity that we are talking about doesn't remain anymore. This portion of Pearson's work is based on Ferdinand Tönnies and his work on Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft typology. Tönnies was interested to compare primitive communities with modern industrial society. And this was followed by Durkheim's mechanical and organic solidarity. Likewise, Tönnies feels the difference between the two are fundamental. He differentiates between the expressive and the instrumental relationship. Each pattern variable represents a problem or the dilemma that must be solved by the actor before the action can be taken. And the choices that individuals make differ according to the type of society they inhabit. That was the reason I told you the difference between the primary and the secondary relationship. Talcott Persson says it depends upon the society to which one individual behaves, individual belongs, that he will be taking the decision accordingly. And this will also reflect the psyche, the pedigree, and the background that he comes from. And, these pattern variables are actually the dilemma that we face while taking an action. And what should be our course of action? Should it be led by effectivity or by value neutrality? Should it be more diffused or should it be more specific? Should it be universal or should it be more parochial? So these are certain decisions that we have to take, and pattern variables always try to talk about this polarity and how to overcome this polarity and move into a more certain form of action. Diffuseness and specificity. The issue is a range of demands in the relationship. If the numbers and types of demands or responsibilities are wide-ranging, then it is diffused. If the scope is narrow or limited, then it is specific. For instance, the difference between the primary and the secondary relationship. For instance, say the relationship between a dentist and his patient, and on the other hand, the relationship between two friends who's been together for a very long time. Here, definitely the range of discussions or the range of demands and expectations that one have for one another are far more widespread. They're across the spectrum and therefore more diffused. Whereas the decisions or the relationship between a doctor and a patient is far more constricted and far more tight, constricted in the true sense of the term. At a point of time, I may have to decide that whether to marry this particular man or not. For instance, he's my boyfriend and we have a relationship for a very long time and he is a very sweet boy who takes care of me. That is one point. But if at any point of time I come to know that he has been, banished by his office or exterminated by his office because he has maligned his task force, any sort of disciplinary action has been instructed by the higher authority against him, then what should I do? Should I really marry this person for the cuteness and for the unending love that he has for me? Or should I be more specific that no, he's been this bad, that he has not been honest to his work, so I should not marry him because he's gone against the resolution to be honest and sincere. So these are certain choices that I have to make, and the decisions often become very difficult to take. The issue is whether or not the actor can expect emotional gratification in the relationship. For instance, moving from primary to secondary education. If you look at effectivity or effective neutrality, this happens in the educational system. Effectivity is you're more emotional towards somebody. You have this emotional bonds within you and you are well aware of it. This happens usually in primary education. When the teacher sits beside you, teacher takes you in your lap and the teacher appreciates the girl for being nice, the teacher doesn't have to think about what the learner has in her mind. She can be open-minded. She can even give her a small, touch or a hug, and that doesn't really matter. And that is important because, this touch is important. How the teachers are well attentive of their learners, how they are fond of their learners, that becomes more reflective. And this is nice. But in the case of secondary or higher education, a distance develops between the teacher and the student, where I have to be very conscious before I speak something in the class, because I know there may be certain girls or boys who might not like my words. So I become very conscious. I become very careful before I blurt out certain words. So this is effectivity or effective neutrality. So in my class, should I be very fond with my students? Should I be very personal with my students, asking them all sorts of questions which I'm not otherwise supposed to ask? Or should I be very conservative? Should I be very disciplined in the class, just sticking to the lessons which I'm teaching them and not going anything outside that? So these are certain decisions which I have to make, and these are exactly the pattern variables, which decides my course of action. The fourth pattern variable is particularism versus universalism. This is a reaction on the basis of a general norm or on the basis of someone's particular relationship to you or your membership to a particular group. For example, there is a universalistic criteria to treat all the students alike, but often hiring may be done on particularistic basis. And this also brings with it discrimination, which is based on particularistic criteria. We always try to go for universalism, that there should be an absolute universal outlook towards everybody, irrespective of their caste, class, creed, religion, nativity, ethnicity, everything. But again, in certain cases of choosing, taking the right candidate, we might, have certain categories or certain, certain frames in my mind. And that may have to do with the primordial relationships which I have. So this again goes for, being particularistic instead of being universal. For instance, some schools, they go for it that if your first child has been to this school, then it will be easier for us to take your second child. So this can be an example of particularism as against universalism, where such schools or some schools do not have such policy. They'll say that we welcome all the students and all the students will be submitting their forms, and it is on the basis of the bona fideness of their forms and on their credit that they will be selected for this school. Whether your siblings belong to this school or not, it really doesn't matter. So these are certain policies that, communities, schools, colleges, higher educations, other institutions take. And some are more universalistic, accommodating all the folds, while others are more particular, more specific, and sometimes being closer to certain predispositions or orientations. But we must be careful that being too particularistic sometimes bring the danger of discrimination. Fifth pattern variable, collectivity versus self-orientation. It involves the dilemma of whether private interests can be gratified or some collective obligations remain to be fulfilled. This is very important, whether there should be a collectivity within you or more of self-determination and more of self-orientation, which also requires that, for instance, whether you should be motivated towards your work and whether you should be doing your work alone just for the money that you are gaining. So that is the self-orientation, as against whether you should be more focused to the work which you are doing, whether it is bringing service for the society. So these are the decisions that we sometimes take. Talcott Parsons wanted to reduce the uncertainty in his theory and specified further the pattern variables. This he calls the system problems and the functional imperatives of the AGIL model. And these are the four major problems he says. He says that, this dilemma comes because we are unable to take decisions very strongly. And in order to do away with this dilemma, to do away with these struggles while making choices, Talcott Parsons proposed this adaptation, goal attainment, integration, and pattern or latency maintenance, which are actually the functions which he thinks a system must perform. These are also the major problems that we go across. So he speaks of a AGIL model. So see, these are the four things that he was talking about: adaptation, is how we respond or manipulate our external environment. Goal attainment, every system must go for goal attainment, which is it must define and prioritize one action over the other, one goal over the other, the goal which is most important to them, and what exactly is the goal that must be spelled out. Latent pattern maintenance, which is cultural patterns that sustain and refresh motivation for action. Sometimes, the system becomes exhausted. They are not able to breathe very easily. So, through pattern C, we are able to pattern maintenance or latency. We are trying to give it fresh oxygen so that it is refurbished and it's supposed to work afresh. Integration is coordination between the different parts. Usually, there are institutions and subsystems which perform these actions. Economy does the work of adaptation. The polity does the work of goal attainment. Religion and law goes for integration, and family and education goes for that safety valves where we can actually throw away our anguishes, our torments, and restore more life and energy to our system. So, as I already said, that these are certain systems which perform this way, and persons identified for basic needs of the system, for every system to perform, unchallengedly and in a vigorous way. These are certain needs that a system must have, which I've already said. Now, the important point about 4 system needs is that they are primarily required for social equilibrium, and these are possible through socialization and social control. Successful socialization produces complementarity of expectations, where both the parties share same cultural values and normative expectations, and actors know that each other's want and respond accordingly. They are motivated to demand societal expectations, and the outcome is equilibrium. So, this is the last thing that we have come to. And all this is for what? For social equilibrium. So that the parts function in concomitance with one another. Individuals know what the societal expectations are. They also share the same cultural values, which I do. In that case, there will be a greater parity between us. There will be less of conflict. I know what he expects from me, and he knows what I expect from him. In that case, even if there is a change or any sort of conflict, any sort of anomaly, there should be equilibrium restored back. Every attempt should be done to restore back the lost equilibrium. So, definitely, we can conclude by saying that Pearson's model provides a very wonderful way of looking at society that focuses our attention on interdependence in spite of differences. And though critics have grumbled that Talcott-Parsons had failed to specify the mechanisms by which systems develop to meet the needs or deal with the functional exigencies, I believe Talcott-Parsons' functional theory is a wonderful system or a wonderful way of explaining how individuals still survive in the cutthroat competition of diversity and difference and heterogeneity. Thank you.